She fled the Mafia boss on their divorce night, tore the pregnancy test, and vanished. 6 years later. Before we get into it, let's make this moment global. Leave a comment in your own language. The rain hammered against the penthouse windows like bullets against glass, each drop a reminder of the storm brewing inside. Isabella Romano stood in the marble bathroom of the Manhattan fortress she'd called home for 2 years, her hands trembling as she stared at the 2 pink lines that had just shattered her entire world. Pregnant. She was pregnant with the child of the man who terrified an entire city. The man who'd made her his wife through a deal between her desperate father and the most powerful crime lord on the East Coast. The man who ruled his empire with calculated precision, but had never once looked at her with anything resembling love. Isabella. His voice came through the door, cold and controlled as always. Marco Valentino, the name that made grown men pale, the Don who controlled everything from the docks to City Hall, through methods whispered about but never proven. We need to talk about the divorce papers. Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Of course. He wanted to finalize it tonight, on what should have been their 2nd anniversary. Their marriage had been nothing but a strategic alliance, a merger of power that benefited his organization and saved her father's failing business from rivals who would have destroyed him. She'd been the collateral, the beautiful trophy wife who existed only to legitimize his empire in high society. She looked at the pregnancy test again, then at her reflection. At 26, she should have been building a life on her own terms, not trapped in a gilded cage with a man who saw her as nothing more than a useful asset. The past 2 years had taught her that Marco Valentino didn't have a heart to give. He'd traded it for his throne long before she entered his life. With shaking hands, she tore the test in half, then into quarters, watching the pieces fall into the toilet like broken promises. He would never know. She would sign the papers, take the settlement he'd surely offer, and disappear before he could see what she carried beneath her heart. Isabella. His voice came again, sharper now. Don't make me ask twice. She flushed the evidence away and stepped out of the bathroom, meeting the cold gray eyes of the man who'd haunted her dreams and nightmares in equal measure. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he controlled, wearing one of his impeccable black suits, his dark hair perfectly styled, his presence commanding even in this moment of ending. Marco Valentino was devastatingly handsome in the way a storm is beautiful, dangerous, untouchable, and absolutely lethal. At 34, he'd built an empire that stretched across state lines, his reputation alone enough to make problems disappear. She'd watched him destroy rival families with nothing more than a phone call, seen men twice his size step aside when he entered a room, heard the stories of what happened to those who crossed the Valentino family. And yet, in 2 years of marriage, he'd never once raised his voice to her, never touched her with anything but distant politeness, never looked at her as anything more than a responsibility he'd acquired. The papers are on the table, he said without preamble. My lawyers have been generous. You'll have enough to start over wherever you choose. Far from here. Far from him. The unspoken words hung between them. Why now? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Why tonight? Something flickered in his eyes, so quick she almost missed it. Because you deserve better than this. Better than me. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her, and it broke something inside her chest. For 2 years she'd hoped to see some glimpse of the man beneath the title, some crack in the armor he wore. And now, when it was too late, when she was about to walk away carrying his child, he showed her mercy. I'll sign them, she whispered. But I want one thing from you first. His jaw tightened. Name it. The truth. Did you ever? She swallowed hard, hating herself for asking. Did any part of you ever want this to be real? The silence stretched between them like a chasm. Rain continued its assault on the windows, the city lights blurring through the water streaming down the glass. His expression remained unreadable, carved from granite and ice. What we had was a business arrangement, he finally said. It's better that way. Safer for you. Safer. As if safety had anything to do with the ache in her chest, the dreams she'd harbored despite knowing better. As if safety could warm the cold sheets she'd slept in alone while he worked through the nights, building his empire and ignoring his wife. She signed the papers without reading them, her signature a death warrant for dreams she'd never speak aloud. When she stood to leave, he didn't move to stop her. "My men will ensure you get wherever you're going safely," he said, already turning back to the window, dismissing her from his life with the same efficiency he used to run his organization. "Goodbye, Isabella." She left without another word, stepping out of the penthouse and into the rain, letting it wash away the tears she refused to shed in front of him. His driver waited by the car, but she waved him off, needing to walk, to breathe, to feel something other than the numbness spreading through her chest. 3 blocks away, she finally let herself cry. Great, heaving sobs that doubled her over in a doorway, one hand pressed against her still flat stomach where a secret grew. A secret that would bind her to Marco Valentino forever, whether he knew it or not. By morning, Isabella Romano had vanished from New York City, leaving no trace except divorce papers and a phone number that would never be answered again. 6 years later, the small cafe in Portland, Oregon was nothing like the upscale Manhattan restaurants Isabella had once frequented. The cozy cup served simple coffee and homemade pastries to a loyal crowd of locals who knew her as Bella Morrison, a single mother who'd moved to town 5 years ago and kept mostly to herself. She wiped down the counter, smiling as Mrs. Henderson praised her blueberry muffins, completely unaware that the hands preparing them had once worn a 5-carat diamond ring and signed checks with the Valentino name. That life felt like a dream now, a nightmare she'd woken from into this quieter, simpler existence. "Mama!" The bell above the door chimed as her 5-year-old son rushed in from the small apartment above the cafe, his dark hair wild and his gray eyes, so painfully like his father's, bright with excitement. "Can I have hot chocolate?" Her heart clenched as it did every time she looked at Luca. He was Marco's mirror image, from the stubborn set of his jaw to the way he commanded attention without trying. The only mercy was that Marco would never know, would never see his own features reflected in the child she'd raised alone. "After you finish your homework," she said, ruffling his hair. "And I told you not to run in the cafe." "But I'm fast like lightning," Luca declared, then froze as the bell chimed again. Isabella looked up and felt her entire world tilt on its axis. 3 men entered, not the usual Portland crowd. They wore expensive suits that screamed East Coast money, moved with the careful awareness of people trained to spot threats, and had that particular energy that set her nerves screaming with recognition. She'd seen men like them before, standing guard while Marco conducted business, their hands never far from concealed weapons. But it was the 4th man who walked in that made her blood turn to ice. Not Marco. Thank God, not Marco. But almost worse, his younger brother, Antonio Valentino. She recognized him instantly despite the years, his sharp features and calculating eyes sweeping the cafe with professional thoroughness before landing on her. Recognition flared in his expression. "Isabella?" Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she was frozen, her hand instinctively moving to rest on Luca's shoulder. Antonio's gaze dropped to the boy, and she watched his eyes widen fractionally as he took in those unmistakable Valentino features. "Mama?" Luca looked between them, sensing her tension. "Who is he?" "An old friend," Antonio said smoothly, though his expression had gone carefully blank. "It's been a long time, Isabella. Or should I say, Bella Morrison?" The message was clear. He knew her secret identity, which meant he'd been looking for her. And if Antonio had found her, it was only a matter of time before Marco learned the truth. Antonio. She forced her voice steady, tilting her chin up with the dignity she'd learned in her brief time as Mrs. Valentino. "What brings you to Portland?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Family business. We should talk. Privately. I'm working. It's important." His gaze dropped to Luca again, lingering just a fraction too long. "Very important. And I think you'll want to hear what I have to say before my brother arrives." Her heart stopped. Marco is here? Landing in 2 hours. Antonio's voice was gentle but implacable. I came ahead to prepare you. He's been looking for you for 6 years, Isabella, and now I understand why you ran. Luca tugged at her apron, confused and increasingly worried by the tension radiating from his mother. She knelt down, forcing a smile she didn't feel. Go upstairs with Miss Sarah, baby. Mama needs to have a grown-up conversation. But now, Luca, please. Something in her tone made him obey without further argument. She watched her son disappear through the back door to where her assistant waited, every maternal instinct screaming at her to grab him and run. But she'd learned in her time with the Valentinos that running only delayed the inevitable. When they were alone, or as alone as one could be with Antonio's men stationed strategically around the small cafe, she met his eyes with as much courage as she could muster. How did you find me? Pure chance, actually. We're in Portland on unrelated business. I saw you through the window. He leaned against the counter, his posture deceptively casual. Does Marco know? No. He's going to. I know. She swallowed hard. What does he want? 6 years ago, you vanished the night you signed the divorce papers. No trace, no contact, nothing. Do you have any idea what that did to him? He wanted me gone. I obliged. Antonio laughed without humor. Isabella, I've known my brother my entire life. I've watched him build an empire, survive 3 attempts on his life, and eliminate rivals without blinking. But I've never seen him the way he was after you disappeared. It nearly destroyed him. The words felt like weapons, each one finding its mark. He signed the divorce papers. Because he thought you wanted freedom. Because he believed you deserved a life away from our world. Not because he wanted you gone. Antonio's expression softened slightly. And certainly not because he stopped. He caught himself, shaking his head. That's his story to tell, not mine. It doesn't matter now. Doesn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it matters very much. Especially since that boy has Marco's eyes, his features, his... Don't. Her voice cracked. Please, Antonio, don't tell him. I can't make that promise. But I can give you 2 hours to decide how you want this to go. He straightened, pulling out a card and placing it on the counter. My number. Call me when you're ready to talk. Because ready or not, Isabella, my brother is coming. And when Marco Valentino wants something, nothing in this world can stop him. He left as abruptly as he'd arrived, his men following in synchronized silence. Isabella stood alone in her quiet cafe, staring at the business card that represented the end of her carefully constructed piece. Through the window, she could see Portland's gray sky and normal people living normal lives. But normalcy had always been an illusion for her, a brief interlude between the past she'd fled and the storm that was about to crash back into her life. Because somewhere above this city, a private plane was carrying the one man she'd never stopped loving, the one man she'd run from to protect both him and their son. And in 2 hours, Marco Valentino would learn he was a father. Isabella stood in the small apartment above the cafe, watching Luca play with his toy cars on the worn carpet, completely oblivious to the hurricane about to upend their lives. Her hands shook as she gripped her phone, Antonio's card burning a hole in her pocket. She had 2 choices: run again or face the consequences of keeping Marco's son a secret for 6 years. Running had worked once. She'd become someone new, built a life from scratch in this quiet corner of the country where Valentino influence barely reached. But that had been before she had a 5-year-old to consider, before she'd put down roots and made friends, before she'd foolishly let herself believe the past would stay buried. And if she was honest with herself, truly honest, part of her had been waiting for this moment since the night she left. Waiting for Marco to find her, to demand answers, to look at her with something other than cold dismissal. Mama, you're making the worry face again. Luca looked up from his cars, his 2 perceptive gray eyes studying her with concern that broke her heart. He was so much like his father, not just in appearance, but in the way he noticed everything, processed information with unsettling intelligence, protected those he cared about with fierce determination. She'd tried so hard to raise him differently, to shield him from the darkness that ran in Valentino blood. But genetics had a way of asserting themselves. "I'm okay, baby. Just thinking about grown-up stuff. Is it about that man downstairs? The one who made you scared?" "I wasn't scared." "Yes, you were. Your hands were shaking. They only shake when you're scared." He abandoned his toys and came to sit beside her, his small hand patting hers with heartbreaking earnestness. "I'll protect you, Mama. I'm strong." "Oh, God." She pulled him close, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and innocence, knowing these might be their last moments of peace before everything changed. "I know you are, sweet boy. You're the strongest person I know." Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. 1 hour. "Marco is ahead of schedule. The hangar at Portland Executive Airport. Come alone or he'll come to you." Her stomach dropped. An hour. She had 1 hour to figure out how to tell the most dangerous man on the East Coast that he'd been a father for 5 years, and never knew it. The cafe bell chimed downstairs. Sarah's voice called up, "Bella? There's someone here asking for you. Says it's urgent." Ice flooded her veins. It couldn't be Marco already. Antonio said an hour, but paranoia made her grab Luca's hand and move to the window. A black SUV idled outside, its windows tinted dark, its presence screaming danger in a way none of the locals would understand. "Stay here," she told Luca firmly. "Lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone but me or Miss Sarah. Understand?" Fear flickered in his eyes, but he nodded with a solemnity no 5-year-old should possess. "Okay, Mama." She descended the stairs with her heart in her throat, each step taking her closer to a confrontation she'd spent 6 years trying to avoid. But when she reached the cafe floor, the man waiting wasn't Marco or even Antonio. He was someone worse. Dominic Russo stood by her counter, his expensive suit and predatory smile completely out of place among the homey decor. She'd met him exactly once, 6 years ago at a Valentino family gathering, one of Marco's rivals who'd eventually been dealt with in the way such problems were handled in that world. Or so she'd thought. Clearly, the rumors of his elimination had been greatly exaggerated. "Mrs. Valentino." His voice dripped with false pleasantry as Sarah watched nervously from behind the espresso machine. "Or should I say Mrs. Morrison? Such a quaint little setup you have here. Very domestic." "The cafe is closed," Isabella said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll have to ask you to leave. But we have so much to catch up on. It's been 6 years since you vanished, and imagine my surprise when my sources reported Isabella Romano alive and well in Portland." His smile turned cruel. "With a very interesting little addition to your family." Her blood turned to ice. He knew. How did he know? "I don't know what you're talking about." "Please." The boy has Marco's eyes, his features. "Did you really think you could hide him forever?" Dominic moved closer, and she forced herself not to back away. "I've been watching you for 3 days, waiting for the right moment. And then Antonio Valentino walks into your cafe and I realize, Marco doesn't know, does he? About his son? Get out." Her hands clenched into fists. "Or I'll call the police." "And tell them what? That you're afraid of a customer?" He laughed. "No, I think you'll listen to what I have to say, because I have a proposal that benefits us both." Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Luca and disappear, but Dominic's men were positioned at both exits. She was trapped. "I'm listening. Marco Valentino destroyed my organization, took everything I built over 20 years. He thought he'd eliminated me, but I survived. Barely. And I've spent the past 6 years rebuilding, waiting for my chance at revenge." His eyes glittered with malice. "That boy upstairs is my revenge." Imagine Marco's face when he learns he has a son he never knew about. A son who's been kept from him. The guilt, the rage, the vulnerability. It will destroy him. "You're insane. I'm patient, and I'm giving you a choice, Isabella. You can disappear again. I'll provide the resources, new identities, money, whatever you need. In exchange, You ensure Marco never finds his son. Let him suffer the loss of something he didn't even know he had. And if I refuse, then I tell Marco myself. But I'll add some interesting details. How you've been living off his money, raising his son to hate him, keeping the boy's existence secret out of spite. I'll poison every moment of their reunion. He leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. Or you could save yourself the pain and just take my offer. Leave, tonight, before Marco lands. The door burst open with enough force to rattle the windows. Antonio Valentino stood in the entrance, his expression carved from ice and fury, his men flanking him with hands inside their jackets where weapons surely waited. The temperature in the cafe dropped 10 degrees. Russo. Antonio's voice could have frozen hell. I thought we made it clear what would happen if you ever showed your face in Valentino territory again. This isn't New York, Dominic said, but his confidence wavered. You have no power here. You're standing in a cafe where my brother's wife works, where his son lives. Antonio moved with lethal grace, closing the distance between them. That makes it Valentino territory, and you just threatened them both. The next few seconds happened so fast, Isabella barely processed them. Antonio made a subtle gesture. His men moved as one, surrounding Dominic and his bodyguards with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this countless times. There was no violence, not here, not in front of witnesses, but the threat of it hung heavy in the air. You're going to walk out of here, Antonio said quietly, and you're going to disappear. Because if I see you again, if I even hear your name mentioned in the same sentence as Isabella or Luca, there won't be enough of you left to identify. Do we understand each other? Dominic's jaw clenched, but he nodded. Whatever power he'd rebuilt, it wasn't enough to challenge the Valentino family on their terms. He and his men were escorted out, their departure leaving a wake of tension and unasked questions. Sarah stood frozen behind the counter, her face pale. Isabella moved to her quickly. Take the rest of the day off, please. I'll pay you for the full shift. Bella, what's going on? Who were those men? Old troubles from my past. It's being handled. Please, just go. When Sarah finally left, reluctantly but sensing the danger, Isabella turned to Antonio. How did you know Russo was here? I've had men watching your cafe since I left. When his car pulled up, I came immediately. His expression softened slightly. You can't stay here, Isabella. Word is out that you've been found. Every rival with a grudge against Marco will come looking to use you and Luca as leverage. I won't let him take Luca from me. He won't. But you need to understand something about my brother. He's different than he was 6 years ago. What you did when you left, keeping his son from him. He has every right to be furious. But Marco is also the most protective man I know. And when he learns about Luca, nothing in this world will stop him from keeping both of you safe. Safe? I've been safe for 6 years. We've been happy here, away from his world. You've been hiding, Antonio corrected gently. And today proved how fragile that safety really was. Russo found you. Others will too. You need Marco's protection now, whether you want it or not. Footsteps on the stairs made them both turn. Luca appeared, his small face set with determination beyond his years. Mama, why are there bad men looking for us? Isabella's heart shattered. This was what she'd tried so hard to prevent. Her son learning about danger and darkness before he even lost his baby teeth. Antonio crouched to Luca's level, his expression gentling in a way she'd never seen. Hey kid, I'm Antonio. I'm your... He caught himself, glancing at Isabella. He's an old friend, she said weakly. But Luca was staring at Antonio with those too perceptive gray eyes. You look like me, like my eyes in the mirror. That's because we're family, Luca. Antonio's voice was barely above a whisper. And family protects each other, which is why your mom and I need to take you somewhere safe. Does my dad know about me? The question came out of nowhere, hitting Isabella like a physical blow. In 5 years, Luca had only asked about his father a handful of times, seemingly content with her vague answers about a man who loved him but couldn't be part of their lives. He does now, Antonio said honestly, and Isabella wanted to scream at him for revealing it so bluntly. And he's on his way here to meet you. Antonio! No more lies, Isabella. No more secrets. Marco deserves the truth, and so does Luca. He stood, his expression firm but not unkind. My brother's plane lands in 30 minutes. You have that long to decide if you want to meet him on your terms or have him show up here. But either way, this ends today. She wanted to argue, to run, to somehow turn back time and prevent Antonio from ever walking into her cafe. But she looked at Luca's face, saw the hope and fear mingling there, and knew Antonio was right. No more running, no more secrets, just the truth, and whatever consequences came with it. The airport, she heard herself say. We'll meet him at the airport. The drive to Portland Executive Airport felt like a death march. Isabella sat in the back of Antonio's SUV with Luca pressed against her side, watching the city blur past while her mind raced through 6 years of justifications that suddenly felt paper-thin. She'd told herself she left to give Marco freedom from an unwanted wife and an unexpected child, that he'd be better off without the burden of fatherhood, without the vulnerability a son would create in his dangerous world, that Luca deserved a normal childhood, away from the violence and darkness that defined the Valentino Empire. But the truth, the real truth she'd barely admitted even to herself, was that she'd been terrified. Terrified Marco wouldn't want their child. Terrified he'd see Luca as nothing more than another responsibility in a marriage he never wanted. Terrified of seeing that cold indifference in his eyes when he looked at their son. So she'd run, taking the choice away from him entirely. Mama, you're shaking again. Luca's small hand squeezed hers. Is my dad scary? How did she answer that? Yes, your father is one of the most dangerous men in America? Yes, his name makes grown men pale and his reputation is built on the ruins of those who crossed him? Yes, I've watched him destroy lives with a single phone call. He's powerful, she settled on, and he protects the people he cares about. But he doesn't know you yet, baby. He doesn't know how amazing you are, how smart and funny and brave. So we need to give him time to understand. But he'll like me, right? Most people like me. The innocent confidence in his voice nearly broke her. Everyone loves you, Luca. How could they not? Antonio glanced at them through the rearview mirror. For what it's worth, Isabella, Marco's going to be furious. He's going to say things he doesn't mean, make threats he won't follow through on. But the moment he sees Luca, the moment it becomes real, my brother will do anything to protect his son, including forgiving you. I don't want his forgiveness. I want him to understand why I left. Then make him understand. But brace yourself. The man waiting at that hangar isn't the same one who signed your divorce papers. The private aviation terminal came into view, its sleek buildings and expensive planes a stark reminder of the wealth and power she'd walked away from. Antonio's SUV pulled through security with a wave, heading directly to a private hangar where a sleek black jet sat on the tarmac. Its stairs were down, its cabin door open. And standing at the base of those stairs, surrounded by men who looked like they could kill without blinking, was Marco Valentino. 6 years had changed him. He'd always been handsome in that dangerous way. But now there was something harder about him, something carved from stone and ruthless determination. His dark hair was shorter, his jaw sharper, his expensive suit perfectly tailored to a body that somehow looked even more imposing than she remembered. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch, those gray eyes that had haunted her dreams, that she saw every day in their son's face. They locked onto her through the SUV window with an intensity that felt physical, a mixture of rage and something else she couldn't identify. Stay in the car, Antonio said as they pulled to a stop. Let me talk to him first. No. Isabella's voice was steady despite her hammering heart. He deserves to hear it from me. She opened the door before Antonio could argue, stepping out into the crisp Portland afternoon with as much dignity as she could muster. Luca scrambled out behind her, his hand immediately finding hers as he took in the scene before him with wide eyes. Marco hadn't moved. He stood frozen, his entire focus on Isabella, and she watched the play of emotions across his face. Fury, relief, betrayal, something that might have been pain, before his expression locked down into the blank mask she remembered too well. Isabella. His voice was exactly as she remembered, deep, controlled, absolutely lethal in its calm. 6 years, no word, no trace, nothing. And then my brother finds you running a cafe in Portland. I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always were good with words. He started walking toward her, each step measured and predatory, his men falling into formation around the perimeter. Tell me, did you enjoy your freedom? Enjoy spending the settlement money I gave you? Enjoy building a life so far from New York that I'd never find you? Each word was a weapon, precisely aimed to hurt. She lifted her chin, refusing to cower. You told me to go. You signed the papers, gave me money, and told me to start over far from you. I did exactly what you wanted. What I wanted? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. What I wanted was for you to have the choice to leave, to not be trapped in a marriage you never asked for. But I also wanted... He stopped abruptly, his jaw clenching. It doesn't matter now what I wanted. Marco. Who's that? Luca's voice cut through the tension, small and uncertain, but impossibly brave. He stepped forward, his hand still gripping Isabella's, but his gray eyes, Marco's eyes, fixed on the man who was his father. Are you Marco? Mama said you were powerful and protect people. The world stopped. Isabella watched Marco's entire being go absolutely still, his gaze dropping to Luca for the first time. She saw the exact moment recognition hit, the way his eyes widened fractionally, his breath catching, his expression cracking as he took in those familiar features, that stubborn chin, those gray eyes that matched his own. How old are you? Marco's voice had gone dangerously quiet. 5, almost 6. Luca tilted his head, studying the man before him with unnerving intensity. You look like me. Uncle Antonio said we're family. Uncle Antonio? Marco's gaze snapped to his brother, murder in his eyes. You knew. I found out 2 hours ago, Antonio said calmly. Same as you. Marco looked back at Luca, then at Isabella, and she watched understanding dawn with a force that made him take a step back. His face went through a dozen emotions in the space of seconds. Shock, disbelief, rage, grief, wonder, before settling on something that looked like devastation. He's mine. Not a question. A statement of fact that resonated with the certainty of someone recognizing their own reflection. Yes. Isabella's voice barely worked. Marco, You left. His words came out low and raw, stripped of the control he usually maintained. You left the same night you found out. You were pregnant with my son and you ran and you kept him from me for 6 fucking years. Luca flinched at the profanity, and Marco immediately noticed, his expression shifting to something like horror. But the damage was done. The fury was unleashed and there was no taking it back. I thought you didn't want this, Isabella said desperately. Didn't want me. You were so cold, so distant, and that night you said our marriage was a business arrangement. So you decided I didn't deserve to know I had a son. You decided I wouldn't want him? You made that choice for me? His voice rose with each question, years of control shattering. I spent 6 years thinking you were happy somewhere, living the life you deserved. I grieved you, Isabella. I fucking grieved the woman I'd driven away. And all this time you were here, raising my child, letting him grow up without knowing who he was. I was protecting him. She stepped forward, her own anger rising to meet his. From your world, from the violence, from the danger that follows your name. Look at what happened today. Dominic Russo walked into my cafe threatening to use Luca as revenge against you. That's exactly what I was trying to prevent. Russo found you because you were unprotected, alone, vulnerable. Marco's hands clenched into fists. If you'd stayed, if you'd told me, none of that would have happened. My son would have been safe under my protection, not exposed to threats you couldn't handle. Your protection? You mean your world of deals and power plays? Of rivals who disappear and secrets that get people killed? I wanted better for him. So you chose this. Marco gestured at the empty tarmac, the isolation. Hiding, running, raising him to never know his father. That's better. I didn't run from you, she heard herself say, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. I ran from what I felt, from how much it hurt to be nothing to you, to lie next to you every night and be invisible, to love someone who could barely stand to look at me. The silence that followed was deafening. Marco stared at her, and for the first time since he'd discovered Luca, his anger faltered. What? You wanted the truth? Here it is. I fell in love with you, Marco. Somewhere between the business arrangement and the cold dinners and the empty bed, I fell completely in love with you. And it was killing me. Because every day I was just another responsibility, another asset, another part of your empire to manage. So when I found out I was pregnant, I couldn't stay. Couldn't watch you look at our child with the same indifference you showed me. Tears were streaming down her face now, years of buried pain rising to the surface. I told myself I was protecting Luca, but the truth is, I was protecting myself. From you. From the heartbreak of being loved by a man who didn't love me back. Luca was crying too, pressed against her side, overwhelmed by the emotion crackling between his parents. Isabella pulled him close, her fierce protectiveness overriding everything else. I know I was wrong to keep him from you, she said, her voice breaking. I know I robbed you of 5 years you'll never get back. But I won't apologize for loving our son, for giving him a childhood where he could be just a kid, not the heir to an empire built on blood and secrets. Marco looked like he'd been struck. He opened his mouth, closed it, then seemed to realize he was standing in an open tarmac having the most vulnerable conversation of his life with a dozen men watching. Inside. His voice had lost its fury, replaced by something rawer. We're not doing this here. He turned and walked toward the plane, expecting them to follow. Antonio moved to Isabella's side, his expression gentle. Go, he said quietly. Talk to him. Really talk to him. You both need this. She nodded numbly, then looked down at Luca's tear-stained face. You okay, baby? Is he mad at us? He's hurt, but we're going to fix it, okay? Your dad and I are going to talk, and we're going to figure this out. They climbed the stairs into the private jet, and Isabella's breath caught at the familiar luxury she'd once taken for granted. The cream leather seats, the polished wood accents, the smell of expensive cologne and power. It was like stepping back in time. Marco stood by the bar, pouring himself scotch with hands that shook slightly, the only sign of his inner turmoil. When they entered, he set down the glass without drinking and looked at Luca with an expression Isabella had never seen on his face before. Wonder. Pure, unfiltered wonder mixed with grief for everything he'd missed. What's your name? He asked, his voice gentle in a way Isabella remembered from late nights when he'd thought she was asleep, when his guard would drop and she'd catch glimpses of the man beneath the armor. Luca. Her son straightened his shoulders, trying to be brave. Luca James Morrison. But Morrison isn't my real last name, is it? It's Valentino. Yes. Marco's voice cracked on the word. Luca Valentino. It's a strong name. Mama says I'm strong. She says I get it from my dad. Luca took a tentative step forward. Are you really my dad? I am. Marco knelt down, bringing himself to Luca's eye level, and Isabella saw his hands tremble as they hovered near their son, wanting to touch, but not sure if he had the right. And I'm sorry I wasn't there for you, that I didn't know about you. But I promise you, Luca, I'm here now, and I'm never leaving you again. Luca looked at Isabella for permission, and she nodded through her tears. Their son launched himself at Marco, small arms wrapping around his father's neck with the easy affection of a child who'd been raised with love. Marco caught him, his eyes closing as he held his son for the first time. And when he opened them again, looking at Isabella over Luca's head, she saw everything he'd never said in those gray depths. The love he'd buried, the fear that had made him cold, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for any of them. "We need to talk," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "All of us." "About what happens now?" Isabella nodded, sinking into one of the leather seats as Luca chattered at his father about school and soccer and his favorite dinosaurs, completely oblivious to the magnitude of what had just shifted in their lives. Because everything had changed. The moment Marco saw his son, the moment he held Luca in his arms, the entire trajectory of their futures had realigned. And Isabella had no idea if that was salvation or disaster. The safe house Marco brought them to was nothing like Isabella expected. Tucked away in the Oregon mountains, the sprawling estate looked more like a luxury resort than a fortress, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking dense forests and a security system so sophisticated it was nearly invisible. But it was a fortress nonetheless. She'd counted at least a dozen guards on the property, each one moving with the practiced efficiency of military training. This was Marco's world, beautiful on the surface, lethal underneath. "Mama, look, there's a pool." Luca pressed his face against the window of their assigned suite, his earlier tears forgotten in the excitement of this unexpected adventure. To him, this was a vacation. He didn't understand that they were prisoners. Willing ones, perhaps, but prisoners nonetheless. "Don't go outside without permission," Isabella said automatically, then caught Marco's expression across the room. He stood by the door, watching them with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. "He's not a prisoner, Isabella. Neither are you. But until the Russo situation is handled, this is the safest place for you both." "The Russo situation?" She laughed bitterly. "Is that what we're calling it? A rival from your past threatening to use our son as revenge? A rival who made a fatal mistake walking into your cafe?" Marco's voice went cold, the dangerous dawn emerging from beneath the vulnerable father. "Dominic Russo signed his death warrant the moment he spoke Luca's name. I'm just deciding how long it takes him to realize it." "Marco, can I go see the pool?" Luca interrupted, bouncing on his toes with barely contained energy. "Please? I'll stay where you can see me." Marco's expression softened instantly when he looked at their son. 10 minutes. Then we need to talk. All of us. About what happens next." Luca bolted for the door before either parent could change their mind, leaving Isabella and Marco alone for the first time since the airport confrontation. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 6 years of unspoken words. "You need to understand something," Marco finally said, his voice low and controlled. "What you said on the tarmac about loving me, about why you left. I shouldn't have said that. It's ancient history." "Is it?" He moved closer, and she forced herself not to back away from the intensity radiating off him. "Because for 6 years, I've been telling myself you ran because I failed you. Because I was too cold, too distant, too focused on protecting you by keeping you at arm's length. And it turns out I was right. I did fail you, just not in the way I thought. You didn't fail anyone. Our marriage was what it was, a business arrangement that we both agreed to. A business arrangement where I fell in love with my wife and was too terrified to tell her. The words fell between them like grenades. Where I watched you smile at other people and wished desperately you'd smile at me that way. Where I lay awake every night, wanting to reach for you, but convincing myself you deserved better than a man with blood on his hands." Isabella's breath caught. "What? You want the truth? Here it is. I signed those divorce papers because Antonio convinced me you'd never be happy trapped in my world. That the kindest thing I could do was set you free. But the moment you walked out that door, I regretted it. I spent 6 years searching for you, Isabella. Not to drag you back, but just to know you were alive, safe, happy. You never acted like you cared, because I was a coward." He laughed bitterly. I built an empire, eliminated rivals, survived assassination attempts, but I couldn't tell my own wife I loved her. And now I find out that cowardice cost me 5 years of my son's life. Tears burned in her eyes. If you'd said something, anything, I would have stayed. I would have told you about Luca. We could have— I know. His voice cracked. Believe me, I know. Every missed birthday, every first word, every moment I should have been there. It's destroying me, Isabella. But I can't change the past. I can only try to build a future. If you'll let me. Marco, it's not that simple. Your world, the danger, is being handled. Right now, every resource I have is focused on finding Russo and everyone who helped him find you. By this time tomorrow, the threat will be eliminated. The casual way he said it, eliminated, sent a chill down her spine. This was the Marco she'd feared, the one who could order deaths without blinking. But when she looked in his eyes, she didn't see a monster. She saw a father protecting his son, a man who'd do anything to keep his family safe. What does eliminated mean? It means you and Luca will never have to fear him again. That's all you need to know. And then what? We go back to Portland? Pretend this never happened? No. He moved even closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the exhaustion in his features. Then, we figure out how to be a family. However that looks. Whatever you're comfortable with. I'm not coming back to New York. I won't raise Luca in that world. Something painful flashed across his face. Then I'll come to Portland. I'll set up operations remotely, visit when I can, be whatever presence in his life you'll allow. You'd do that? Leave your empire? Isabella, I built that empire because I had nothing else. No family, no purpose beyond power and survival. But now I have a son who doesn't know me, who I need to prove I'm worthy of. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And I have you. Even if you never forgive me, even if all we can be is civil co-parents, it's more than I deserve. More than I hoped for 6 years ago when you disappeared. The honesty in his words shattered the last of her defenses. She'd spent 6 years telling herself Marco was cold, unfeeling, better off without them. But the man standing before her was bleeding from emotional wounds she'd inflicted, trying desperately to piece together a family he'd just discovered. I don't want civil, she heard herself say. I don't want you visiting Luca like some distant relative who swoops in occasionally. If you're going to be in his life, you need to be in it. Fully, completely. No half measures. Hope flared in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying we try. Really try. Not for duty or obligation, but because— She swallowed hard. Because maybe it's not too late for us. Any of us. Before he could respond, Antonio burst through the door, his expression grim. We have a problem. Russo isn't acting alone. He's aligned with the Moretti family out of Chicago, and they're making moves against our operations. This is bigger than one man's revenge. Marco's entire demeanor shifted, the vulnerable father disappearing behind the mask of the Don. How many men? At least 50, maybe more. They've been planning this for months, waiting for the right leverage. Luca is that leverage. Then we move him, tonight. Somewhere they'll never find him. No. Isabella stepped forward, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her. No more running. You said you'd protect us, Marco, so protect us. But don't send us away. Isabella, you don't understand the danger. I understand perfectly, but I'm done hiding. I'm done running, and I'm done making decisions out of fear. She looked between the brothers, seeing the same stubborn determination reflected in both sets of gray eyes. If they want to use Luca to get to you, then we stay together. Let them come. Absolutely not. Marco's voice went hard. I won't risk you or Luca. Then end this, tonight, however you have to. Because I refuse to spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. The two men exchanged a long look, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Antonio nodded. She's right. Running just delays the inevitable. We need to handle this permanently. I know. Marco's jaw clenched. Call everyone in. Every family that owes us a favor. Every alliance we've built. If the Morettis want war, we'll give them one they'll never forget. Marco, Isabella started, but he cut her off with a look. No. You asked me to end this, and I will. But it means I need to leave. Tonight. And I need you and Luca to stay here, under Antonio's protection, until it's over. How long? 72 hours, maybe less. He moved to her, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence in his words. 3 days, Isabella. Give me 3 days to eliminate this threat, and then I promise you, I'll come back. We'll figure out the rest together. And if something happens to you? It won't. I have too much to lose now. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I just found you again. Found our son. I'm not giving that up for anything. Not even an empire. He kissed her forehead, a brief, tender touch that held 6 years of longing, then pulled away before she could respond. Antonio, keep them safe. If anything happens to them, it won't, his brother assured him. I'll protect them with my life. Marco nodded, then looked toward the window where Luca played by the pool, completely oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Tell him his father will be back soon, and that I love him, even if I don't have the right to say it yet. You have the right, Isabella whispered. You've always had the right. He held her gaze for one more moment, something raw and desperate in his eyes, then turned and left. She heard him giving orders in rapid Italian, heard the sound of vehicles starting, felt the entire energy of the safe house shift to something harder, more dangerous. Antonio touched her shoulder gently. He'll be okay. Marco survived worse. Has he? Because this time he's fighting for something other than power. This time he has something to lose, which is exactly why he'll win. Antonio smiled slightly. You and Luca are his greatest weakness and his greatest strength. The Morettis just made the mistake of threatening what Marco loves most. They won't survive their error. Isabella moved to the window, watching Marco's convoy disappear down the mountain road, carrying the man she loved toward a confrontation that would determine all their futures. She pressed her hand against the glass, feeling the cold seep through, and whispered a prayer to a God she wasn't sure was listening. Keep him safe, please. For Luca. For us. For the family we might finally become. The 72 hours Marco promised stretched into 4 of the longest days of Isabella's life. Antonio received hourly updates but shared little, his expression growing grimmer with each phone call. All she knew was that Marco was alive, fighting, and refusing to return until the threat was permanently eliminated. Luca asked about his father constantly. Where was he? When would he come back? Why couldn't they visit him? Each question broke her heart a little more, because she had no good answers. How did you explain to a 5-year-old that his father was waging war against people who wanted to hurt them? On the morning of the 5th day, Antonio found her in the safe house library, staring out at the forest without really seeing it. It's over, he said simply. Her heart stopped. What do you mean over? The Morettis surrendered 2 hours ago. Russo was dealt with yesterday. Marco's on his way back now. He should be here within the hour. Relief flooded through her so intensely she had to sit down. He's okay? He's not hurt? Few scratches, nothing serious. But Isabella. Antonio hesitated, which was unusual for him. You need to understand what happened, what Marco did to end this. Tell me. He offered them a deal. The Morettis walk away, keep their territory and operations, face no retaliation for their alliance with Russo. In exchange, they acknowledge Luca and you as untouchable, off-limits to every family, every rival, every threat. Anyone who violates that protection answers to every major family on the East Coast. That's good, right? It's unprecedented. Marco basically turned you and Luca into neutral ground, protected by the entire organization. But to make it work, he had to make concessions. Big ones. Her stomach dropped. What kind of concessions? He stepped back from several operations, ceded territory he's held for years, agreed to limitations on his own power. Essentially, he weakened his empire to strengthen your protection. Antonio's expression was unreadable. Some in the family think he's gone soft, that having a son made him vulnerable. And what do you think? I think my brother finally found something worth more than power, and he's willing to sacrifice everything to keep it safe. He smiled slightly. He also made one other decision, something he wanted to tell you himself, but I think you should know before he arrives. What? He's stepping down as Don, effective immediately. He's handing control of the family to our cousin Vincent. Isabella's mouth fell open. He's what? Marco is walking away from the empire he built. He's keeping enough resources to stay protected, enough influence to honor existing commitments, but the day-to-day operations, the power, the control, he's done. He told Vincent this morning that he has a family to build, and that matters more than any throne. Tears blurred her vision. Antonio, he can't do that. That empire is everything to him. No, it was everything. Until he held his son for the first time. Until he understood what he'd missed. What he almost lost forever. Antonio's voice gentled. You changed him, Isabella. You and Luca. You made him want to be a better man than the one who let you walk away 6 years ago. The sound of vehicles approaching made them both turn toward the window. 3 black SUVs rolled up the driveway, and Isabella's breath caught as Marco emerged from the lead vehicle. He looked exhausted. His expensive suit was rumpled, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and she could see fresh bruises on his jaw and knuckles. But when he looked up at the house, searching the windows, his entire expression transformed. She was running before she realized it, down the stairs and out the front door, her heart pounding with relief and love and desperate need. He met her halfway, catching her as she launched herself at him, his arms closing around her with a fierceness that spoke of how close they'd come to losing everything. "You're okay," she gasped against his neck. "You're really okay." "I promised I'd come back." His voice was rough, exhausted, but alive. "I promised, Isabella." They stood there clinging to each other while his men discreetly looked away and Antonio shepherded Luca outside. Their son's delighted shriek of, "Dad!" made Marco pull back, just in time to catch Luca as he barreled into his father's arms. "You came back! I knew you would! Uncle Antonio said you were fighting bad guys, and I told him you'd win because you're the strongest." Marco's laugh was choked with emotion. "Not the strongest, buddy, just the most stubborn. And I had the best reason in the world to win. Because of me and Mama? Exactly because of you and Mama." He looked at Isabella over Luca's head, his eyes holding promises and hope, and a future neither of them had dared imagine days ago. "Can we talk? The 3 of us?" They ended up in the safe house garden, Luca between them on a stone bench while late afternoon sun filtered through the trees. Marco held their son's hand like it was the most precious thing in the world, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on small knuckles. "I need to tell you both something," he started, his voice serious. "About what happened and what I decided. Antonio told me," Isabella said softly, "about you stepping down." Surprise flickered across his face. "He did? Was he wrong to?" "No, I just wanted to be the one to tell you." Marco took a deep breath. "Luca, do you know what I do for work?" Their son's brow furrowed. "Uncle Antonio said you're like a king, that people listen to you and you keep them safe. Something like that. But being that kind of king means I have to do things that aren't always safe, that keep me away from people I love. And I've decided that's not the kind of king I want to be anymore." "So you're not a king now?" "Not really. I'm just your dad. A guy who wants to learn what your favorite dinosaur is and take you to soccer practice and read you bedtime stories, if that's okay with you." Luca's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You want to do all that stuff?" "More than anything." "Then it's definitely okay." Luca threw his arms around Marco's neck. "Can we start now? I want to show you my dinosaur books. And I can teach you about velociraptors because they're my favorite. Marco's eyes closed, his arms tightening around their son. When he opened them again, tears tracked down his face. The first time Isabella had ever seen him cry. "Go get your books," he said, his voice thick. "I want to learn everything." Luca raced off toward the house, leaving his parents alone on the bench. Isabella reached for Marco's hand, intertwining their fingers. "You didn't have to give up your empire for us." "Yes, I did, because that empire was built on the belief that power was the only thing worth having. But you proved me wrong. You and Luca are worth more than every territory, every alliance, every ounce of influence I ever accumulated. But what will you do? Who will you be without it?" He smiled, a real smile, not the cold expression she remembered from their marriage. "I'll figure it out. Maybe I'll learn what it's like to be normal. To take my son to school and kiss my wife goodbye in the morning and worry about mundane things like mortgage payments instead of territorial disputes." "Your wife?" Her heart hammered. "Marco, we're divorced." "A technicality I intend to remedy, if you'll have me." He shifted to face her fully, both hands capturing hers. "Isabella, I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I failed you the first time, was too afraid to show you who I really was, too convinced you'd be better off without me. But I'm not that man anymore. The past 5 days taught me what really matters. And it's not power or control or empires. What is it? You, Luca. Building a life that's ours, not defined by obligations or arrangements or fear. Learning to be the husband I should have been and the father I want to become." His gray eyes held hers with desperate hope. "I love you, Isabella. I've loved you since the day you walked into my office for our wedding planning and called me out for being an arrogant ass. I was just too much of a coward to say it. And now? Now I'm terrified you'll say no. But I'm more terrified of not asking, of losing you again because I was too afraid to be vulnerable." He squeezed her hands. "Give me another chance. Let me prove I can be the man you deserve, the partner you need, the father Luca should have had from the beginning." Isabella looked at their joined hands, feeling the calluses on his palms, the strength in his grip, the slight tremor that betrayed his nervousness. This was Marco Valentino, the man who'd made the entire East Coast bow to his will, asking her permission to be part of their lives. "I have conditions," she said finally. Relief and wariness warred in his expression. "Name them. We stay in Portland, our home, our life, our terms. You can keep whatever connections you need to stay safe, but our family doesn't get pulled back into that world." Agreed. Luca comes first, always. His safety, his happiness, his childhood. We raise him to choose his own path, not inherit yours. Absolutely. And we do this right. No rushing, no grand gestures, no trying to recreate what we didn't have before. We start fresh, date, learn each other, build something real. I can do that. His voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Anything else?" "Yes." She pulled one hand free and cupped his bruised jaw, seeing him flinch slightly at the tenderness of the touch. "You promise me, Marco, that you're done with that life, that when you say you're walking away, you mean it, because I can't watch you put yourself in danger anymore. I can't lie awake wondering if you'll come home. Our son can't grow up wondering if his father will survive the night. I promise." He turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss there. "My war days are over, Isabella. I'm just a man who wants to spend the rest of his life making up for lost time with his family." "Then ask me properly." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He slid off the bench, kneeling before her on the garden path, still holding her hand, looking up at her with every wall stripped away. "Isabella Romano, mother of my child, love of my life, woman who's haunted my dreams for 6 years. Will you give me another chance? Will you let me court you, learn you, prove to you that I can be worthy of your love? And someday, when you're ready, will you consider marrying me again? Not for business or obligation, but because we choose each other. Through her tears, she smiled. Yes, to all of it. Yes. He surged up, capturing her lips in a kiss that held 6 years of longing, regret, and desperate love. It was nothing like the polite, distant kisses of their first marriage. This was fire and passion and promise, the kind of kiss that spoke of forever. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luca's voice came from the doorway. "Does this mean Dad's moving in with us? Because I'm gonna need help building my dinosaur habitat, and Mama isn't very good at the tall parts." They laughed, both of them, the sound carrying across the garden and into the future that was finally, miraculously theirs to build together. 3 years later, Isabella stood in the doorway of Luca's room, watching Marco help their now 8-year-old son with his science project, a meticulous recreation of a Jurassic ecosystem that had taken over half the dining room table for the past week. "Dad, the T-Rex can't go there. He'd eat the herbivores before they could migrate." "Good point. Where do you think he should go?" "Over here, near the volcanic region. It's more strategic for hunting." Marco caught her watching and winked, his reading glasses sliding down his nose in a way that was unbearably domestic and completely adorable. 3 years ago, she never would have imagined the fearsome Don Marco Valentino wearing reading glasses and debating dinosaur placement with his son. But then, 3 years ago, she'd never imagined any of this. Their life in Portland had become beautifully, wonderfully normal. Marco had kept his promise. He'd stepped away from the empire, maintained only enough connections to ensure their safety and honor existing commitments. Most of his days were spent consulting for legitimate businesses, managing investments, and being a full-time father. The transition hadn't been easy. For months, Marco had struggled with letting go of the control he'd wielded for so long. He'd taken Luca to school with a security detail that terrified the other parents until Isabella had put her foot down. He'd nearly had a heart attack the first time Luca got hurt on the playground, ready to wage war over a skinned knee. He'd been awkward at parent-teacher conferences, uncomfortable at birthday parties, completely lost navigating the social dynamics of elementary school politics. But he'd tried. God, how he'd tried. He'd learned to braid Luca's hair when Isabella was sick. He'd mastered the art of making dinosaur-shaped pancakes. He'd coached Luca's soccer team despite knowing nothing about the sport, learning alongside the kids with endearing determination. He'd read every parenting book he could find, attended every school event, been present in ways that mattered far more than grand gestures or expensive gifts. And somewhere along the way, he'd become just Marco, not the Don, not the crime lord, but a man building a life with the family he loved. "Mama, are you just going to stand there, or are you going to help?" Luca called out, pulling her from her reverie. "I'm supervising. Your father said I'm not allowed near the hot glue gun after the incident." "In my defense," Marco said, trying not to laugh, "I didn't know you could get glue in your hair." "It was one time," Luca giggled, the sound as natural as breathing, no shadows of the violence that had once threatened to consume them. He knew his father had come from a different world. They'd been honest about that. But he also knew his father had chosen them, had walked away from power to be present for school plays and soccer games and science projects. The doorbell rang, and Isabella went to answer it, smiling when she saw Sarah from the cafe with her husband and 2 kids. "Ready for movie night?" Sarah asked. "The kids have been talking about it all week." "Almost. Marco's just finishing up with Luca's project." They'd built this, friendships, community, a support system that had nothing to do with fear or loyalty or obligation. Sarah knew the bare bones of Isabella's past, but had never asked for details, accepting her friend at face value. The other parents at Luca's school knew Marco as the quiet dad who volunteered for field trips and brought amazing Italian food to potlucks. Their neighbors knew them as the couple who'd moved in 3 years ago and kept mostly to themselves, but were always willing to help with a flat tire or a borrowed cup of sugar. It was a life she'd dreamed of, but never believed possible. "Dad, can I show everyone my project?" Luca bounded into the living room, his eyes bright with excitement. After the movie, Marco said, following more slowly. He'd changed from his usual suits to jeans and a t-shirt, his hair slightly mussed from Luca running his fingers through it earlier. He looked younger, lighter, happier than she'd ever seen him. The evening passed in a blur of animated movies, popcorn fights, and children's laughter. Sarah's kids adored Marco, climbing on him like a jungle gym while he pretended to be various dinosaurs at Luca's direction. It was so far removed from the man she'd married 8 years ago that sometimes Isabella had to remind herself they were the same person. After their guests left and Luca was tucked into bed, Isabella found Marco on their back porch, staring up at the stars visible beyond Portland's light pollution. "Penny, for your thoughts?" She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Just thinking about how different life is now. How much better." He turned in her embrace, pulling her close. "Do you ever regret it? Letting me back in?" "Never. Do you regret giving up your empire?" "Isabella, I traded an empire built on fear for a family built on love. There's no comparison." He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then her lips. Soft and sweet and full of promise. "Though I have to admit, coordinating playdates is more stressful than most of the negotiations I used to conduct." She laughed against his mouth. "You're doing great. The other parents love you. They're terrified of me. I heard Mrs. Chen tell her husband I have dead eyes. You do not have dead eyes." I might have given her son's bully a very calm, very detailed explanation of why bullying was unacceptable. Apparently, my version of calm is other people's version of terrifying. Did the bullying stop? Immediately. Then I'd say you succeeded. Unconventional methods, but effective. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "I love this life, Isabella. I love driving Luca to school and having normal conversations about homework and bedtime. I love Saturday morning pancakes and movie nights with friends. I love falling asleep next to you and waking up in a house full of life instead of silence. Speaking of which..." She bit her lip, suddenly nervous despite 3 years of building this relationship. "I have something to tell you." Concern immediately flooded his expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, it's just..." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach, watching comprehension dawn in his gray eyes. "I'm pregnant. About 2 months along. I wanted to be sure before I told you." His hand splayed across her stomach, protective and wondering. "We're having another baby?" "Yes. Are you okay with that? I know we haven't really talked about..." He kissed her, cutting off her nervous rambling with such tenderness it made her melt. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. "I missed everything with Luca. Every moment of your pregnancy, his birth, his first years. I've lived with that regret every day since I found out about him." His voice was thick with emotion. "But this time, I get to be there. For all of it. The good, the bad, the terrifying. And I get to experience it with you. So that's a yes?" "That's an absolutely, definitely, 100% yes." He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her still flat stomach. "Hi, baby. I'm your dad. And I promise you, I'm going to be there for every moment. I'm going to mess up sometimes, probably a lot, but I'll always be there. Always." Isabella ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it ached. "We should tell Luca soon. He'll want to know. Tomorrow. Tonight I just want to hold you and think about the fact that we get to do this together." He stood, lifting her into his arms with ease. "I love you, Isabella. More than I ever thought I could love anyone. I love you too, my reformed Mafia boss." "Retired Mafia boss," he corrected, carrying her toward the house. "I'm a legitimate businessman now, with very specific skills that I use exclusively for protecting my family and intimidating elementary school bullies, and building dinosaur habitats. The most important use of all." They spent the night wrapped in each other, talking about the future in a way they never could before. Names for the baby, how Luca would adjust to being a big brother, whether they should expand the house or move to something bigger. Normal conversations about normal concerns, without the shadow of violence or danger hanging over them. In the morning, they told Luca over dinosaur-shaped pancakes. His excitement was immediate and overwhelming. He was going to be a big brother. He could teach the baby about dinosaurs. He would protect them from bullies. Marco's eyes met Isabella's across the table, and she saw everything reflected there. Love, gratitude, wonder at the life they'd built from the ashes of what they'd lost. "Can we name the baby after a dinosaur?" Luca asked seriously. "Because that would be really cool." "Absolutely not," Isabella and Marco said in unison, then laughed at their synchronized response. This was their life now, messy and loud and absolutely perfect. Built on second chances and forgiveness, on love that had survived separation and secrets, on the choice to be better than the past that had tried to define them. Marco Valentino had once ruled an empire through fear and power, but he'd discovered something far more valuable. That true strength lay in being vulnerable, in choosing love over control, in building a family that chose him back. And as Isabella watched him help Luca plan the baby's dinosaur-themed nursery, a compromise that she'd already resigned herself to, she knew without doubt that they'd made the right choice. All of them. Together.